I'm Dr. Thomas Smithyman. How do I stop overthinking after a social interaction? I get this question all the time. It generally looks like some version of someone has been out socializing with people. The next morning, they wake up thinking, oh my God, what did I say? What did I do? I was so offensive. I was weird. No one liked me. And then they sit around thinking about it all the time, identifying all the ways they'd screwed up and attacking themselves. And many times, this may be you, they start texting people apologies. There was someone I worked with who used to do this and would text an apology saying, sorry, I was so weird last night, as a way of trying to make up for the problems. And he later on realized that doing that was actually weirder than whatever he'd done the previous night. So I'm going to tell you exactly what I do. This is really helpful for me. So the first thing I do is I do psychological distancing. So I step back and I identify, like, why do I have this coming up for me? And the reason is, we're built with this. We are supposed to have a threat system that protects us from social injury. We're built with this. And so I start by recognizing why it's here and what it's trying to do. So we have this protection part of our brain that is designed to prevent us from getting socially injured. But even more than that, it's trying to prevent us from doing something terribly wrong and getting kicked out of the group and dying. That's not a likely scenario now, but our brains are 35,000 years old. That was a relevant thing in the past. So we have a part of our brain that is working really hard to prevent us from getting kicked out of the group. Sometimes it makes us really anxious in advance of social interactions so that we don't do anything wrong. But sometimes, but the other side is after we have had a social interaction, it kicks in, and what it's trying to do is go over everything we did and figure out, did we screw up? What can we do to repair that, and how do we prevent it in the future? So that's step one. Know why we have this, what it's trying to do. And part of the reason we do this is we want to have some self-compassion. One of the biggest problems I see is people fighting with parts of their own brain. So there's a part of them that they don't think should be there, and so they criticize and attack themselves. It causes a lot of conflict. So instead we want self-compassion. We want to understand why that network is lighting up, what it's trying to do. Then we can be kind. Having done that, we've pulled back and we understand, this is a network in my brain. It's trying to protect me and prevent me from being kicked out of my social group. Thank you for trying. The second thing we do is we turn on this part of the brain, our rational brain. The protective network in my brain, it wants to go over my entire social interaction, look for all the things that I've done wrong. It's trying to figure out what could be done differently. Do I need to do something about it? The problem is we also know that that's not very accurate. Like in the research into this, it's called post-event rumination. We miss all the things that we did well. We hyper-focus on the supposed negative things. And instead of helping us in the future, we know that actually makes us more and more anxious the next time that we interact. So I want to cut that off. Our protective system is not made to be accurate. It's made to be protective. So it's better safe than sorry. So I remind myself of some research. I remind myself of something called the liking gap. And it's the series of research that shows that after we interact with somebody, we are liked more than we assume. We will leave thinking we're not that well liked, but the research shows people like us more than we think. And not only that, if you have any social anxiety, we know again from research, we're even more likely to criticize our performance and underestimate how much other people liked us. The third thing I do, and maybe the most important one, is I shift the metric by which success is measured. What we're normally doing is we are deciding things went well if people like me and they approve of me. There's some obvious issues to this. One, a lot of those are private thoughts in the other person's head, and we are just really terrible at mind reading. So we'll probably get it wrong, so it's not a very good one. The other one is I can say the same thing to two people. One person will like me, one person will not like me. So Who's right? How do I decide if I did well or not? Is it really going to come down to a particular person's whims in how they respond? I mentioned in my book there was one day where I talked to somebody, said hi, we had a great interaction. I talked to somebody else and they picked up their backpack and ran away. Pretty different responses. I did the same thing. So we want to switch the metric of success from being external approval to internal approval. So what I mean by this is, when I am deciding if I did well or not in a social interaction, I am not looking at how did people seem to respond. I am looking at, did I live up to my ethics and my values? Did I follow through on what matters to me? Because I know that if I did that, I am proud of myself, I'm okay with myself, regardless of whether it is one of the approving people or the disapproving people. This may be the most important factor because it means that our success is within our own hands. So for me, what I always ask myself is not, did they like me, but was I warm? Was I curious? And was I authentic to myself? And if I did all three of those things, then I've succeeded. If they like me, great. If they didn't, that's too bad. So the final piece of this is, while we've been focusing on integrity as the metric of success, we want to be weakening the idea of approval as success. So what I mean by this is, we want to help that protective network calm down and not feel like it needs to kick in all the time. So the way that we do that is basically we stop reinforcing it, we stop feeding it. So the metaphor I'd use for this is, imagine there's a kid who wakes up in the night and is really scared, runs through to the parents' room and says, oh no, there's a boogeyman under the bed. If the parents responded with like, oh my God, there's a boogeyman under the bed? Oh no, quick, get the weapons, let's go hide, let's go run away. The parent's gonna respond that way. The kid's not gonna calm down, right? The kid's gonna think, my fears were right. This was true. This was really, really dangerous. And then the next night, the kid's gonna be just as scared again, right? Because the parents are reinforcing it. So every time that your threat system activates, and then you willingly choose to treat those threats as dangerous, you're strengthening it. So the good news is there's a real opportunity here. So if you can stop feeding it, you're basically taking the fuel away. Whenever we sit and we go over the event again and again, we analyze, we look for things, we reassure ourselves, and we're dedicating more and more time to going over these possible risks and screw-ups we had, we're adding fuel to it. We're keeping it going. It's getting stronger. So what I recommend instead is ask yourself, what would I do if I was certain there is no risk? In this situation, what would I do right now if I was certain that I did fine and there's no social problems with my performance the other day? Well, would you sit and go over the event again and again? Probably not, it's probably pretty boring. Would you sit and hyper-focus on yourself and think about all your flaws? Probably not. If you were certain there was no risk, what would you do? Maybe you'd be investing into connecting with friends, maybe you'd be exercising, maybe you'd be doing hobbies. So that's my final piece of this. So as a wrap up, this is partly for me to remind myself, but also to remind you. If I have a social interaction and I meet new people and the next day I have that part of my brain kick in that's like, you screwed up. Everyone hates you and you were really offensive. Here's what I do. One, I go, yeah, that's you. You're my protective part of my brain. You're trying to keep me safe so I don't get kicked out of the group. Thanks. And two, I know that is likely an overblown risk. There's the liking gap. We have all this research. I probably did fine and you probably like me more than I realize. And then three, I'll ask myself, well, how did I do? How do I think I did on my internal integrity metrics? Was I warm? Was I curious? Was I true to myself? Assuming there is no risk here, if I was certain there was no risk here, what would I do right now instead? And then I go and do that thing. And by doing this, I am helping myself in the moment from not adding fuel, but also I'm slowly weakening this over time. Okay, so if you want to learn more about these strategies and kind of my overall approach to social anxiety and to dating, you can look at my book. It's available everywhere, and I think it's pretty great.